Aloha and welcome to the Empowered Empath podcast. My name is Jennifer O'Neill.
And I'm Michelle Schneider.
Welcome to our, our banter, our spiritual lifestyle podcast. Michelle has the most amazing questions. Everybody keeps messaging me and telling me how awesome your questions are. So keep
I'm
up
just
the good work.
I'm just an inquisitive gal. That's all.
Keep up the good work of being inquisitive. Which will probably fall into one of our 7 stages. Well, actually, most everybody's going to fall into the 7 stages of a spiritual awakening, which is the subject that we chose today. I think that the subject is really important simply because I feel like people get confused when they start a spiritual journey, a spiritual path, a spiritual awakening, and they want to kind of figure things out. But I think it can be helpful if you at least know that there's kind of stages that you're going to go through. So whether you're a newbie, you've been doing it for a while, or you're kind of advanced, it's nice to know why you're having the stages that you're having as, I don't know, as you go through.
Yeah, and I think, now more than ever, I think there's a lot more people that are starting to wake up to spirituality than they might not even been on their radar, but they might be in a place where like, what's happening to me? I kind of was going through the same thing, when I went through it. So
Mhm.
I think it'll be
Well,
good for everyone.
and speaking to that, I think that a lot more people are having a quote unquote spiritual awakening than ever before, than I've ever seen in my career. But that's also leading to a lot more resistance. Weirdly enough, people, I'm noticing a lot more clientele coming in, or people coming in that are just super resistant to any shifting and changing. And we've been talking about this. The transitional shift that's happening right now, I think, is doing not just the transition part, but it's also awakening a lot of people as well, within the spiritual realm. You're starting to feel this shift. And with that feeling that you're getting, I am noticing a lot of people being very resistant. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a little tantrum, because change is uncomfortable.
Right. Well, and it's not even just that. With the tantrum part, it's once you start talking to them and going, these things are not working for your life, you really need to shift them. I'm noticing a lot of people being just nervous about that or resistant to that. And I don't think that that's uncommon at all. I think it's actually more common right now. I've even found myself doing that in some regards. And so I have to work through that in a way that I'm like, okay, well, this clearly isn't working. I clearly need to transition over here. The universe is trying to kick me off this track, and you just really want to see where that track goes, so you kind of just stay there. I view it kind of like that, like you're trying to finish that experience, you're trying to go through that thing. And so you're maybe resistant to timing, maybe resistant to something new, maybe resistant to your life shifting. And you know what's really interesting about that, though, as we get into the spiritual awakening thing? Usually, when we're being prompted with this transitional energy, the universe is going, yeah, but don't stay there. And you're like, yeah, but it's working kind of good. No, it's not. Don't stay there. And you're like, but I kind of want to see where this goes. And then they're like, don't stay there, and they keep throwing all these signs in front of you not to stay there.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting that we weren't really happy where we were, so that experience, that path that you're on, you're not usually getting a nudge to move to a different path if you're happy in that path.
Yeah.
There's the illusion of being comfortable, which I think leads to the illusion of contentness, which you translate into, oh, I'm happy because I'm content and I'm comfortable and I'm used to this energy. But that is a very different frequency than being happy. They are not even close.
Yeah, and I feel like I've probably went through this recently where I'm holding on so tightly to things because they feel safe, they feel familiar. It's okay, but it's not good.
Oh no, it's not good. You bottleneck energy then. You bottleneck the energetic flow always when you're kind of holding on to something tightly. You are not allowing the energy to flow. You're not allowing it to move freely. You're trying to control the energetic flow, and that doesn't work well. But it is interesting how much that we kid ourselves in thinking that this path that we're on, that the universe keeps trying to kick us off, is good for us or okay or like fulfills something, because the universe typically will not come in and try to kick you off that path if you weren't desiring something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
So
does.
the desire has to be put in place for you, the universe, to come in and then kick you another direction. Because if you're aligning with discord, if you're aligning with feeling unhappy, if that's kind of in alignment with your frequency, you're going to keep going down that way anyways. So you're, whether you're aligning with happiness or discord, if you're in alignment with it, it's going to keep you moving the same direction. If you're not in alignment with it, that's when the universe goes, yeah, this isn't going to work for you. You have to jump ship or jump tracks. And I think that that's kind of an interesting thing that people don't think about, is if there's obstacles in front of you, if there's things that are trying to change your trajectory of where you're going, then usually that means where you're at, there's some discord there. You're not in alignment with that track and where it's headed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so the discord is going to prompt the universe to swoop in and go, well, here's the where you really want it. Here's what you're aligned with. Here's what you're looking for. And truth be told, like I said, it can be on both ends of the scale. People who are, I guess, want to like a lower frequency, they might, not be aligned with a higher frequency, and they might have the universe coming in and kicking them over to, no, here, go align with this lower frequency over here too. So you can have it on both ends of the scale. It's not always it's kicking off to get to a better place. It's just about being in alignment and having discord, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So then we have this transitional energy that is amplifying everybody's frequency anyways. So any discord is going to be amplified. And then you're going to start noticing the uncomfortableness of all things. And then you're just like, oh, okay. I don't like this. And then the universe goes, great, come over here. And you're like, yeah, I don't think so. I don't want to be over there. That's scary. It's new. It's weird. I don't know. I don't know about that. You just hold on a minute over there. And then we get into a battle, right? And then they'll go, okay, here, try this one then. No, I don't think, I'm not really sure I want to do that. It's so a whole back and forth. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is spiritual crisis. That is going to be stage one. This is typically when you start noticing discord, and you start noticing that you're not in alignment. You start noticing that things don't feel great. And that's called a spiritual crisis. It doesn't feel good, hence the spiritual crisis. And so you might start noticing this with relationships, with jobs, feeling frustrated, unsettled with where you're at in life, feeling more irritated than normal, all of those types of things. That would be a spiritual crisis mode. So that is the first part of, I would say, of a spiritual awakening. You start to notice that things don't feel good. And that can be really hard for people, though, because when you hit a spiritual crisis mode, especially with all the transitional energy, all the things that have changed, you will find a lot of times that you are in the same exact position that you were in potentially 6 months ago or even a year ago, and nothing really's changed from that. And then all of a sudden you find my relationship is not working for me, or my job is not working. You start feeling more edgy or irritated because your exact same thing you've been doing now doesn't feel good to you. So that is really confusing for a lot of
Yeah.
people.
It's kind of like hitting your breaking point. I went through this. I think career is like a huge kind of theme in my life. And when I had got all these wonderfully cool jobs, I'm successful, I'm doing well, and yet I'm in the parking lot wishing that I didn't have to go inside because I just didn't want to be there. Like it
Mhm,
was just this feeling of being so lost and so
mhm.
confused of like, I have worked my entire life to get to this point and I hate it. And you
Right.
just you feel so down and so lost and you just don't even know how to move forward.
Which leads you into the second stage, which is very true. Very good. You didn't even probably know we were going there. Which definitely leads you into a spiritual depression. And that is a real thing. And I don't relate spiritual depression to exactly the same thing. I guess I've never really thought about it too much about if all depression is spiritual depression. Um, I think that there's some differences here. So that might be a good thing to think about because I'm just thinking about this right now. Spiritual depression, I feel like, will, I guess I would say, account for a lot of depressive factors in people's life where they do feel like really depressed because they're not aligned with their spiritual self.
Yeah, and if this helps, I would say I think, I would say I've been super depressed
Mhm.
at several different points in my life. This was definitely a point where it was massive depression, but it wasn't like a chemical imbalance, It
Right.
wasn't something
Yeah.
that was like, oh, your body it just needs medication. It was beyond that. It was a what the hell am I doing on this planet
Well,
kind of.
yeah, it's more of a what does my life mean? What is my purpose about? Like it's not like a or like a grief depression. Like maybe you
Yeah.
lost a relationship or you lost a loved one. I feel like that's a different type of depression.
Yeah.
This is I'm questioning my whole existence and my whole reality as I know it. But now that I think about that, that probably does account for a lot of depressive things out there. And speaking of chemical imbalance, I do feel that if you don't move through some of these stages and make shifts and changes towards what you're really desiring, it can lead to a chemical imbalance in the body. I know this because I work with a lot of spiritual health stuff and I do a lot of the healings. And I do see how it leads to a sort of the physical body not functioning properly because the spiritual body is the owner's manual to tell the physical body how to operate.
Yeah.
And I'll get into that in a whole nother podcast, but it's a very cool thing once you learn how this works. Um, or you can wait for my book. If I ever get my first book finished, then I can go into that book and then we don't have to talk about this anymore. I can just
Hurry
go
up.
buy the book. Right. So there is a component to that when you ignore that for so long and the spiritual body is given your physical body direction and how to operate and how to release the hormones and how to move energy flow and how to operate properly. If the spiritual body is in a depressive state, and that would mean it's low vibrating. It's not operating at its optimal level. It's kind of behaving a little bit sickly because we're not um, feeding it the nutrients that the spiritual body needs. We're not activating it in the way it needs. And what that means is we need to do things that allow it to connect in with a higher frequency, but also allowing it to charge with a higher frequency, allowing it to maintain a higher frequency. And those things will require shifting and changing of what your current path is on if you're not already there. It doesn't just change over time. It takes action to change these things. It takes you recognizing, which we're going to get into, your path is not the path that you should be on. So all stages of a spiritual awakening really stem from your spiritual body not being nurtured the way it's supposed to be nurtured, but also being more aware of your spiritual body, and then, nurturing that spiritual aspect of who you are. And that's what causes all these different stages, is you start to feel it. You go, there's something more to me. And that's the thing that people don't realize, when you're going, there's something more to me. There's something more to this life. There's something more to why I'm here. That's because you're starting to be so aware of the spiritual energy, your spiritual body, your soul, that allows your physical body to operate, that you can feel the difference between feeling that and connecting in with that aspect of yourself, or really ignoring that aspect of yourself. If you ignore that aspect of yourself throughout your entire lifetime, it's really pretty easy, because then you can just follow along what everybody else does. You can make choices that don't align with your spiritual self, and it doesn't matter, because you don't have any discord, because you're not connected in. And then you might be still unhappy in an unhappy place, or doing whatever, but none of that. Again, you're not feeling the discord because you're not sensing something's off. There's more to life. There's more to my happiness. There's more to who I am. And that's the thing that kind of sets apart ignoring your spiritual body, or starting to become aware of it, which is the point of the spiritual awakening. So then you go into that spiritual depression stage, feeling lost, sad, unsure, of where you're going or what you're supposed to do in life, and all of those sort of things. And that can be where you have to make a lot of changes, or you're going to need to be a little bit more active. I don't think people like it when anybody gets in the spiritual depression stage, because this sometimes does require you to shift things that make your family and friends very uncomfortable. Maybe you don't want to work at that job anymore. Maybe you want to, I don't know, do something different in life. Maybe money doesn't mean everything to you anymore. Maybe discovering more about the spiritual realm and how that operates is interesting to you. People sometimes don't know how to relate to that. They're like, what do you mean? Why would you quit that job? Why would you be unhappy at that job? You're making six figures. Like, what are
I
you
know,
doing? Like,
that was kind of like my situation, because this was kind of like the inkling of me being like, I think I want to work for myself, and that makes, my family very nervous, of like, you're going to do what? Like, you have this really good job and you're going to just leave it behind?
yeah, it really makes people very uncomfortable. And then a lot of people will think that's, I guess, midlife crisis type stuff can fall in there. Not that every midlife crisis is a spiritual depression stage, because it then has to lead to more awakening stages. But that's, I think, when people feel like, oh my God, Michelle's gone off the deep end. Yes, she's lost her
Like, are
mind.
you
Have you talked
okay?
to her? Have you talked to her? Do you not agree with do you agree or not agree? Because I feel like we should have a sit down. We should have a conversation, steer her in the right direction, which is right back where she was, which made us feel happy about Michelle's life. That's the other interesting thing that people don't realize, is you have most likely made a lot of decisions in your life. Even I have, other people have. I don't think that this is uncommon, because I know there's going to be some people out there going, no, I didn't. No, I didn't do that. But you most likely have made a lot of decisions based on other people's happiness and their comfort, and kind of easing their fear, whether it would be parents, friends, even, spouses, or different things. And, well, even your own fear. So just making choices based on kind of calming those. And how people typically do that, they take a kind of a analysis, in a sense, like, whether it's unconscious or conscious analysis of, well, I know this many people in life that did this and that worked out well. Or they kind of take a summary well, if you go to college, you can do this, or if you don't go to college, then your life just fails, you
Well,
know?
yeah, I think society kind of trains you to like, well, you go to school and then you go to college and then you get married and then you have kids and then you have your job and then you just live happily ever after with the white picket fence. And it's like, nope, it doesn't work that way. You go down that path. I think I even probably did it, when I got married, it's like, okay, I guess we get married now. And that didn't work out. That was horrible. I'm like so thankful that I left that situation, but
Right.
yeah, you can't go along with what society tells you.
Well, I guess that would be more, it'd be called a societal structure, you know? And so I feel like that's most people's default. And I feel like most people are trained about that from a very young age, unless you have some parents that are not more unconventional, I guess I would say, and or they have unconventional jobs, or their thought process is more unconventional. You're not brought up to be like, oh my god, that painting's amazing, you should totally do this, like, we should have a show, you should, like, when you're younger, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you're musically inclined, wow, are you going to do something with that? Would you like to do that for your future? Do you want to pursue that more? That's not something typically that people do. They're like, oh yeah, you're really good at that, but and maybe you can take that class in college when you go get a real job. And then if you decide not to go to college, you're just like, oh my god, my kid's going to be a failure.
I mean,
What are
I'm
you
sure I
gonna
made my parents nervous. I went to art, I got an art degree. I think that's typically, people don't think that you can really do a lot with an art degree. I did, but I think it still made me nervous.
right? Or they think that people who don't take college seriously, when I went to college, that was the thing, they would be art degree majors or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you get a job doing that? But I feel like depends on where you live, because I know that in some areas of the country, you're just have this life path that most people, the societal one, where you can make money doing XYZ, this, that, and this, and then the ability to make money outside of that is really non-existent for a lot of people, because they feel like that they don't have opportunities in their areas, which is kind of interesting to me, because we grew up in the Midwest, and most of the people in the area we were at, the girls were nurses or teachers, and the guys were in construction. That, no kidding, that was really just the top three things. There was a school there, a school that put out teachers, a nursing school, and then the guys did construction because that was the best paying job. And if they went to school and went back into construction, the guys. So it was an interesting thing that I feel like molds your spiritual purpose in a sense, where you're in a stage 3 and trying to figure out what your spiritual purpose is. You don't look inward, you look outward in a sense.
Yeah.
And that seems to become your options. And the options are limited in some areas. They just really are. Or within some groups, the options are limited. We moved away from there, and the opportunity to make money doing all kinds of freelancing work, or musical things, or artistry stuff, or photography, or it was just mind boggling how many opportunities there were that were not inside that little hub of a community. And that was one of the reasons that we had actually moved away, is I was very concerned, not to mention the economy wasn't really good at the time, but I was seriously concerned about how my children were going to become adults. That really made me nervous, that the opportunities seemed very limited there. And I knew my children were not limited beings. They just were not. They were never, ever, ever going to fit into that category. It was not going to happen. And so the first thing we did, if there's any parents out there, is we actually took them traveling a lot when we lived there, which is another funny thing, because everybody is like, you're taking your kids? Like, what, but they're going with you? Like, and I'm just like, yeah. Oh, but you're not going by yourself? It's just like this so weird thing. And I'm like, no. I mean, I like to take my kids. I like hanging with them. And I wanted them to see what was outside what I called the bubble. You
Yeah.
have these communities that have bubbles, and they do not believe that things exist outside the bubble. And so I wanted them to see that there was so much more. And as they got older, I noticed that they were very different from a lot of their friends. They really, really were, because they had been traveling a bunch. They had seen a lot of other places. And we made it a point to take them a couple places a year to different areas and different bigger cities and show them a lot of different things. So their perception and their mindset was very different than their friends. And then when we had the opportunity to move, oh man, I was just like, oh, thank goodness. I just did not see them fitting into that. And what would have happened if they would have been miserable? They absolutely would have been miserable. I knew from the moment my children were little. I remember having this conversation with my mother-in-law once, and she asked about Jake's and said, I said, he will never live here. It's never going to happen. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because I know him. He's a traveler. It's never going to work. If he were to be here and not travel, he's going to be miserable. Well, I don't think that's true. I'm like, well, I know it's true. This kid travels everywhere. I mean, he literally just got back from, where even was he? Oh, Japan, Thailand, and South Korea. Like, I mean, he's traveling constantly, but it's very easy to travel from here, and the prices are better. And that's where he met his wife that I knew he would never meet there. And my daughter she considered nursing school for a half a minute, and this would make so many parents proud. And it just made me, almost hurt. I was like, this does not feel good at all. This does not fit her, but that's what she felt like her option was. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But anyways, she moved out here and got a fashion degree, and is very creative and creates all kinds of different things. And they both have opened businesses. It's like, it's very different. So that kind of went off on a tangent, but spiritual purpose is when you begin to take action. And that is on the heels of spiritual depression. So hopefully you don't stay in the spiritual depression stage very long. You move into taking action. And that's where we were talking about the shifting, you not making friends and family very happy, you deciding to go on a different route, you deciding to move away like I did. You begin to take action, and that can be huge, but it can be something that a lot of people don't agree with. However, I like this stage because it's typically your first stages of spiritual alignment. So that's an important stage, because you start to look and feel for what feels in alignment with who you are. Like just with my daughter, am I a nurse or am I a creative person? Like, no, she is definitely not. So you start to figure out that part of who you are. And that will typically be when you become more aware of spiritual senses, signs and synchronicities, intuitive hits, uh, synchronistic numbers, things of that nature, usually will be at the beginning stages of a spiritual purpose
Yeah,
stage.
and I would say with my experience too, it was like I didn't know much about spirituality at all. I didn't even grow up with religion, that really nothing in that realm was something I had really experienced or knew about. And the one weird thing was when I was going through my divorce, I was seeing a therapist, and like she kept introducing some spiritual, themes, was having me read books, and like I would go back and I would think about those things, and I was like, man, that is really interesting. And I think that that's kind of what sparked a little bit of curiosity, knowing I was like, maybe there is something, more to this universe. And that really got me down a path to wanting to learn all about it.
So was this after your divorce, you said?
Yes. So 2013 was when I got divorced. And so I would say it was a few years after that because it was like that. I really wasn't, it was almost like I wasn't ready to hear those things and I was not
Mhm.
super interested. But fast forward about 4 years, 4 to 5 years later, and I was deep into it. I was
Well, the reason
very,
I'm asking is for a lot of other people out there, because I do feel like sometimes a major event, a catalyst event, if you're not more aware, like I was clearly very aware of this when I was younger. Like, I mean, somebody somebody asked me, "Have you ever heard of Silva mind control?" And I was like, "Yeah." When I was 5. I'm like, that's my dad used to train us in it all the time. And then it's because everybody's talking about it now like it's new. I'm like, this has been around for so long. And yeah, that was so far. So my path is clearly different than your path. And
yeah,
I feel that sometimes it does take a major event for you to go feel like I've hit rock bottom and there needs to be something different for my life. Like I know that I'm here for a different reason. I'm not here just to be in rock bottom.
yeah,
Does that make sense? And so
absolutely.
then I thought a lot of people in your situation probably can relate to that, because I feel like that was sort of, I view it like a bouncy ball. It's like you hit the ground and then you come up again. If you're heading that way and it
Yeah.
feels like nice, you start to soar. So then you start going through the stages. So during the spiritual crisis stage, you absolutely can have some type of catalyst event as well. It doesn't have to be that you just woke up one day and you're just miserable in the same job, in the same place, in the same relationship, whatever. It doesn't have to be that that happens, but sometimes there is a catalyst, a divorce, maybe a loved one has passed away and it makes you view time as more valuable, and or there was your job shut down and you have to look for something else. So some type of event or experience can also kind of spark this moving along.
Yeah.
Then we get into the spiritual awareness stage, which is super cool. I really like the spiritual awareness stage. I do feel like once we start gaining momentum, I feel like stage 4, 5, and 6, we kind of like can blaze through those, and you can kind of be hanging out in, you know, different areas of those stages at the same time. But once you get to where you're taking action and then you get to the spiritual awareness stage, I feel like there can be a snowball effect that can be pretty cool. And that's when you are so aware of energy, or more. I don't want to say so aware, because I feel like there's going to be people that are definitely in the spiritual awareness stage that they're like, well, I think I feel energy. It does feel kind of like this, or you know what I mean? And so it's just the time when you start to becoming more aware of energy everywhere. You start to feel you are drawn to certain people with certain energy, or you are more like, I don't like this. And that can also be something where you're like, this job used to fit me really well, but now it doesn't, type of thing, or this relationship was great, now it's not. That can also be that time frame, because you're noticing energies a lot more. Do you remember when you started feeling energies?
Gosh, I would probably say ooh, it's hard. It was like maybe in the 2019, and that was still, I mean, I didn't actually, I looked back and I was like, I can't remember when I started connecting with you, and I don't think that was until 2021, which it feels like I've known you forever, but that
I
was
know,
only
right?
like three
Well, there's
years.
that whole past life thing, so there's that. But
But yeah, I would say 2019 was probably the area where I was like really starting to be aware of things.
right. Okay. Well, this is also the stage where you might relate to this. You can and probably will start noticing discord within the physical body. So that can be when physical things start to become apparent, you know, like this I don't know, stomach issue, or this These negative emotions start really upsetting my body, or I notice when I'm around so and so, I feel very drained, things of that nature. You start to kind of notice there's more of a correlation with your spiritual body, or maybe you don't notice, but you notice there's something else more to your physical body feeling a certain way. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of the time that you feel, the connection between your spiritual body and physical body aware, or aware, that is there. You start to notice the connection. You start to notice, if I'm in this place, I feel a certain way. If I'm not in this place, I don't, or around this person, or you start to feel the effects physically, either super high vibe effects, feeling great, feel like I'm just out of body. And those things might happen too, where you're starting to feel more out of body and possibly even more disconnected. If you're really connecting with your spiritual body and you start gravitating towards that, that can make you feel out of body more. This would be the stage I feel like a lot of people are more aware of astral traveling and things of that nature. So there's a lot of physical body sensations that you'll probably notice within the spiritual awareness stage. And that will also typically be when resistance becomes a problem for some people. I do feel like, and resistance can be anywhere from stage 4 to stage 6 again. But this is a stage that I feel like there's a lot of people in right now, is just putting on the brakes. They just don't want to make a shift and a change. But they're aware that the shift and change should probably happen, but they're really struggling between the 3D world, the physical realm, and the spiritual aspect of how the universal laws work and all of that. And so that will then propel you into the spiritual sponge stage, which is stage 5. You want to learn more about everything. You want to learn, how does this work, how does that work, what is the universal laws, what is the manifestation, what is the law of attraction, what is all of these things. And so you start to really want to just read everything, consume everything, gather all the knowledge. You develop your relationship with energy. You start developing an energetic dictionary. You really start just downloading and consuming all information.
It was
This
an obsession for me, which was like I hadn't read books in years, like since college. And suddenly, I'm reading books on like quantum mechanics and all this stuff because I'm
Yeah,
like, this is fascinating.
right. And it there's a kind of high that comes with a spiritual sponge stage, because that's again where, and you have almost, I want to say it, a spiritual chiropractic moment where you start to align again, because we're going to have all these adjustments where you align and then feel a little bit out of whack, and then you align again, and then we keep aligning. You keep having to adjust your spiritual alignment. So as you're moving through these spiritual uh stages, these spiritual awakening stages, do keep in mind that it's not like you go through all the stages and then you're just so aligned it's ridiculous. We're constantly realigning. So you're going to work through a couple of the stages and align with that, and then you're going to have some other uncomfortable moments, and then we're going to align again, and then we're going to, it's like we're layering. We are continuing to get better and better. I guess it'd be like if you went to a tailor and they kind of adjusted, everything to fit your body, but then you realize that you still needed it tucked here, and you really needed it form fitted over here, and you needed the pants a little bit shorter and whatever. And it's just like some constant adjustment. We're we're
Yeah,
we're aligning.
rebalancing just continually.
Yeah, so we're constantly aligning. And so this is where the spiritual body and the physical body can work really well together. This can be such a huge stage. The brain wants to work with the spiritual body. It's meant to. That's how they're designed. The problem is you. Just to call it like it is. You cause a block between your spiritual body and your physical body. You drive a wedge. You are the determining factor of whether they are going to work together, which is what they're trying to do always from birth. They are trying to work together. They are made to work together. They naturally want to work together. As we grow older and gain our belief system and create that, we start wedging little things in between the spiritual body and the physical body's frequency so that the connection is less and less and less. We start driving a wedge, we start driving more stuff in there, and then we continue to create this blockage until they're having a hard time communicating. And so this is the stage where the brain is so excited because it gets to reconnect with the spiritual aspect of yourself, because you start pulling out those resistance points, which are wedges within the connection, blocking the frequency. And that's really important. So the brain is like, yes, we get to, I know that I'm supposed to do this. I'm excited about it. Unfortunately, when you become an adult, by that point, we kind of have to retrain the bodies how to work together in a sense, or we have to retrain ourselves not to keep putting in uh, the resistance wedges to jack up the communication flow. So we have to relearn how to work together. The mind, body, spirit has to relearn how to naturally do what it naturally does. And you're going to get some of it. And some days you're going to be like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done. This is perfect. And other days you're going, what was I thinking? How come it's gone? What happened? I don't feel anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is when the brain needs knowledge so that it can work with the body. And that's where reading, training, development, all that kind of stuff comes in, which is going to be really important, because then it's like, oh, yes, that's what energy is. Oh, yes, that's why I feel that way. It kind of needs a system.
Yeah.
So then we get into the next stage, if you work through that one, which is spiritual release. And this is kind of more of a honeymoon phase of the spiritual awakening stages, because this is when things start to feel really good and your resistance is mostly under control. You're doing better at really embracing spiritual knowledge. You're doing better at believing how the spiritual body works, how the spiritual realm works, how energy works within the physical plane. You have a better understanding that it is a huge part of our life's existence, huge. And that feels good, because where you were feeling like you had no control in the beginning stages of the depression and the crisis mode, that usually stems from you also feeling like, I have no control over my life. Why does my life feel like this? Why is it happening to me? Why is these things happening? Why is that person doing better than I am? Why was my life better before? It starts to feel like you don't have any control of the path that you're on and where you're going and what your future looks like, when that's actually not even true. The more that you get into understanding how the spirit realm works and how energy works and how much a part of just all existence that it is, whether it's materialistic, whether it's experiences, whether it's relationships, how much of a role that plays, you actually start to feel more in control. So for all the control freaks out there that want to micromanage their life, you're probably doing it wrong. You actually will have some control but you have to relinquish control first, which is a very mind puzzle. It's kind of a weird process,
Yeah.
but it's true, because what you're trying to control, you're controlling from uneducated knowledge base when it comes to the spirit realm. You're coming from a place of not enough knowledge to learn how to have some sort of control over your life. You've learned the wrong components. That is why you feel out of control. What you've learned was just the wrong things for getting what you want. So when you go through all the stages and get to this part, now you're learning correct things on how things actually manifest, how the world works, how much of a role that energy plays within your every existence and every materialization, every experience, every relationship. And when you start understanding that component from the spiritual sponge stage, then now, oh, we can work with this. Now you feel like you're more a part of creating a future you would want, and you're starting to see results. And now we can invest our frequency in that and move forward.
I have questions.
Oh, good.
In your opinion, do you think a spiritual awakening is ever really over? Or do you continually awaken to new and different things as you continue out your path? Like, for example, you learning how to do the healing work, which, that was something that you had awakened to? Like, is it ever really over?
Oh, 100% I awakened to it. For any of those healers out there, it was not on my radar. I was not interested in it whatsoever. Like, it didn't even interest me for years and years and years. I mean, I've done spiritual work for over 30 years. Wasn't even I was just like, that's not even my wheelhouse, not interested. I like this area over here. And then it started become interesting to me how how your spiritual body did give the physical body instruction. And once it started becoming interesting to me, everything just downloaded in like a mass, huge downloading. I want to almost say like a dump. It just came in massive chunks, and my knowledge in there just shot up. So to answer your question, no, I hope we don't ever stop an awakening. I feel like if you do, you're probably Jesus or Buddha or somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're
like, I just
probably
didn't want anybody out there to be like, "Well, did it, I'm done, I finished," like, I don't
I'm
think
good to
there's ever really
go.
over.
We're good. No, I absolutely I think that part of the awakening process, especially in these last stages, are some of the funnest stages ever. They're creative, they're exciting, they're new, you're gaining new information. So, unless you have zero desire to learn anymore, I think that they could shut down, but I don't feel that we finish the process while on earth. Like I said, unless you've achieved the status of, Buddha or being Jesus. I feel like maybe they have, and I don't know if they even would say they have, if you could
Right.
talk to them. So that was a very good question. No, I do not think that there's necessarily an end. What I think is important about the spiritual stages, the spiritual awakening stages, is it helps you to understand there's more to where you're at, especially when you're in the beginning stages, and there's more good stuff to come. And where you're at is probably not uncommon. It's probably very common where you're at. So you're not feeling alone. You're not feeling isolated. And you're feeling like, oh, this is a process. This is a spiritual process. This is what I'm going through. I'm going through a spiritual process. I'm not lost. I can find myself again. But feeling lost is a part of a spiritual process that
Yeah.
leads you to a greater, happier, more connective place within the spirit realm that has a lot more fulfillment to it than going online and purchasing things from Amazon. It just has so much more substance to it, and it has such a cool frequency to it, but it is a process. It's all a part. So the confusion, the crisis stage, the confusion, the feeling lost, the being upset means you are in the beginning stages of a process. And I think that that's where it can be super helpful. So that was a good question.
Yeah.
So then we get into the spiritual release, like I said, where we had learned about all these things and we start really working with manifestation, we have a better understanding with energy, a better relationship with energy, a better understanding of the spiritual body. The spiritual body and the physical body are working together. So I'm thinking a lot of us, you, myself, whatever, we kind of hang out in stages 5, 6, and 7 for a lot of the time. I still feel like I'm a spiritual sponge to the spirit world. So at where I'm a channel, I'm retaining my or gaining my information and then retaining it from the spirit realm. So where I'm not necessarily reading books, I'm downloading. But in the spiritual sponge stage, that can be where you get your info from too. And the more I keep myself on a high frequency level, the more downloads I get and the more information I get, which then allows me to write these books that are taking me like a million years to write. Yeah. I was like, I thought I'd be done with this in 3 weeks. Jake's like,
It
Mom,
doesn't work that way.
I was like, I think 3 weeks would be really fast to write a book. And when he said it out loud, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. In my overachieving brain, I'm like, yeah, but if I could have done so many words a day, I could have got to this in the 3-week time frame. Of course, it did change and it got bigger, but there's that. But the last stage is spiritual clearing and development. I really do like this stage, but this will be the ones that, take off a lot of people too. Because this is the time where you start to be so aware of your energetic environment that you also start kind of clearing your houses, your spiritual house, your relationship house, your physical house. You become very aware of energy and you start noticing how much energy affects your life and how much those relationships and experience affect your life. And you might switch jobs, you might move, you might just not have the same friends in your life anymore. Or you might just view them differently. You might put up different boundaries. You might spend your time differently. I'm hoping that during this stage, most people start viewing their energy as more of a valuable currency, which I will be talking about more in other podcasts and other the books and things of that nature. But I do want to talk about that a little bit here. However, I need to talk about the development part. This is also where you really working with your spiritual senses typically and that sort of thing and kind of evolving those. But spiritual currency, I feel like that's a very important part of stage 7, where I have done this exercise with clients where I'm like, imagine that you have $100, but it's in energy. So, in a sense. And I have noticed that people tend to spend this money. Just imagine that you get it every day. Every day you wake up with a new $100 and you get to go out and spend it, but you have to spend all of it that day. I feel like a lot of people spend it like it's pennies. They really just do. They're just spending it here and spending it there and then putting some effort into this relationship and then doing some things on social media over here, and they're just spending hours of their pennies over here, and then they're not using it like it's valuable. And hopefully when you get to this stage, you view this $100 currency as gold coins and that they really have value to them. It's very important where you invest these gold coins. It's very important how many gold coins you put into this relationship. Is this relationship valuable enough to spend these gold coins? And if it is, or how many gold coins? Are you spending a lot of your gold coins, which would be maybe you spent 15 of your gold coins, 15% of your energy that day into this relationship because it was valuable? Or did you spend 15 gold coins and 15% of your energy that day into something that was just super draining and just pulled so much more that it required 5 more gold coins, and now we're at 20% that you've now put into something that you'll never receive anything back from, and it doesn't make you feel good. There wasn't a good energetic exchange. You just felt crappy afterwards. The other thing is possibly doing some projects, whether it be work or artistry stuff or whatever, but maybe those gold coins and that energy is spent well on a future return. So, for instance, I'll use my thing, for example, me writing books is spending valuable gold coins on a future return of, I have this energetic exchange happening with thousands of people who will read my books, and they gain value from that. And I'm investing in those people. That's a good investment for me to spend my gold coins investing in helping others. That's really incredible.
Yeah.
And so you want to pay more attention if you use this exercise to where it is that you're spending your gold coins and your energy throughout the day. It's hugely important. And I've actually gone so far as to suggest writing this down for people. How much gold coins did you spend where? And those gold coins represent a percent of your energy. And once you start viewing your energy as that valuable, you will shift. I'm telling you, it does this weird thing with your brain. You will shift where you're spending them. And when you look at them as gold versus pennies, everybody tends to just be wasteful. I don't want to say everybody, that's not fair. A lot of people, because we're not aware, spend them wastefully.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I want to say that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So did you have any other questions now that we've gone through all the stages?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Well, we covered a lot today. So hopefully you have found this helpful. If you've listened to this, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to post below, because we do check. On YouTube, you can post. I don't think you can do that on iTunes. And do you want to go over the?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, if there are questions that you have about this topic, but also if there are other topics that you are curious about and would love for us to explore, you can always feel free to put those in the comments as well. And then be sure to like the video if you found this information helpful, if it resonated with you, and please subscribe if you haven't already, so that you can be aware of future podcasts coming out.
Right. And hit the notification button. Isn't that a thing?
Yeah, hitting the notification, way you'll
be
reminded.
Yeah, definitely give us a thumbs up. That really helps us know which subject you're really loving. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. That's really helpful for me, Michelle. We look for that. All right. So until next time, hopefully you are doing well on your spiritual journey, and we will see you next week. Have the most amazing day. Aloha. Bye.
Bye.
Introducing Instagram teen accounts, a new way to keep your teens safer as they grow, like making sure they've got the right gear for riding.
Knee pads.
Check.
And helmet?
Done. See you, Dad.
New Instagram teen accounts, automatic protections for who can contact your teen and the content they can see.